Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Person You Want to Be. I am your host, Eric Teplitz. I am honored to be joined today by someone who has been a big inspiration to me personally, Ray Fauteux. Ray Fauteux grew up in Vancouver, British Columbia, and currently resides in Calgary, Alberta, in Canada. A heavy drinker and smoker for much of his youth, Ray was inspired by the 1976 Olympic Games in Montreal to take up the sport of running at the age of 27. The completion of his first marathon the following year was the beginning of a career in endurance racing that would last over 3 decades. During that time, Ray completed over 30 marathons, 2 50-mile running races, countless 10K races, and 11 Ironman Triathlons, including his very first one, Ironman Hawaii in 1984, which holds a special place in his heart. At the end of his competitive amateur career, Ray built a website, Ironstruck.com, to inform and inspire those new to the sport of triathlon. Ray never claimed to be a professional triathlete, coach, doctor, or nutritionist, but rather had a desire to share the knowledge he had personally gained through decades of endurance training and racing. From there, Ray wrote and self-published his first book, Ironstruck, The Ironman Triathlon Journey, in 2006. Ironstruck was responsible for inspiring hundreds, if not thousands, of people around the world, including yours truly, to take on the challenge of the Ironman. Over the next 12 years, 5 more self-published nonfiction books followed. These include Lifestruck, Finding Your Best Self Before You Grow Up, which is a book for teens and preteens that encourages them to incorporate sound nutritional choices and regular exercise into their lives. An autobiographical book entitled When Running Is Not Enough, Discovering What You Are Truly Capable Of, and a book specifically for older adults called Seniors on the Move, A Guide to Quality of Life and Longevity. His most recent book is It's Kona Calling, which is a work of fiction inspired by his own experiences racing in the 1984 Hawaii Ironman. Ray Fauteux, welcome to The Person You Want to Be.
Hi, Eric, and thanks for having me on your show.
I am delighted. I'm so glad you agreed to do this. And I want to start off, like I usually do in these interviews, by asking you about your childhood, your home life, the environment you grew up in. And then also specifically, I'd like you to think back about perhaps your earliest memory or earliest notion that you might have had about the person you wanted to be, who it was you were, what it was you wanted to do, who you wanted to become, if you can recall.
Yeah, well, I grew up in a very dysfunctional family, basically with no mother because she disappeared from the scene when I was about 5 years old, to my record. I have never seen her since. I'm 73 now. I did hear she passed away 5 years ago. So
Wow.
that sister who is still alive, a sister who I've only seen 3 times in 50 years. I also have a brother who, for him at 16 years old, he was an older brother. It was either the army or jail. So he joined Princess Pat's as soon as he was old enough. And I never saw him again. I saw him one day. He came over for Christmas, I think the next year. And that was it. I never saw him again.
So what was the age difference between you and your siblings?
4 years for my brother and 6 years for my sister, who was the oldest.
I see. So you were the youngest, is that right? Gotcha.
So it turned out I was the one who was home alone with my father and a woman he was living with, common law. Not the best years of my life. He, like, I always thought, oh, very cool, because he never missed any work. right? He always went to work, no matter how much he drank, no matter how hungover he got. But then I realized after, well, he had to work to fuel his habit, right?
Mm.
It wasn't much for anything else because there was never any money to buy clothes or food sometimes or pay the rent, right? So it was something he did for himself, I think, more than anybody else. And what I remember most is the violent arguments, that he was very argumentative and loud when he was drunk, where I would be in bed and I would hear all this, and, and I was, grade 5, grade 6. And, you just cry until the pillow is so wet, you have to turn it over. And that all the time. So it was no physical abuse, but it was emotional abuse that I think in a lot of ways is even worse, right? Because it's with you. I'd go to school, I'd be so tired from not being able to sleep the night before that I would get hell from the teachers. Like, I couldn't win, right? It was just always there. It impacted everything I did. I never wanted to get too close to people. I didn't want to make any friends, even though I knew other kids out there, of course. But I didn't want to get too friendly, but they might say, well, can we go to your place? Because I was too ashamed of my father. I never wanted to take anybody there. So I ended up having one really good friend. His name was Joe. And he was from a traditional Italian family. Never once did he ever ask questions about my family or going to my place. And so the more that went on, the more I liked him. I became almost part of their family. So when traditional Italian family, the sisters, he had a couple of sisters, and Joe and, mother, father, all lived in the house, and the sisters lived there till they married, right? They had these amazing meals, like these family every week. And their mother was every time I saw her, she was stirring something in a pot, right? She was an amazing cook. Didn't speak a lick of English. And of course, they owned a grocery store, they owned a restaurant. And so all the kids helped in the stores and the restaurant. That's what they do, right? So I'd be sitting there having dinner with them, and I just would be in awe. I would look at this and say, God, what a family like this. I wish I could have this, I wish I could, but I knew what I was going home to. But they almost became my second family. It was my escape. I think something else that saved me was that I was at school one day, and this kid says, well, there's a club down the street over there that, you can go and you can, play shuffleboard and ping pong, and they got a gym. And I didn't know what he was talking about. So I went down there, and it was the Boys Clubs of Canada, right? So I went in there, and man, I was in heaven. They had everything in there. And I just kind of started going there every day after school. I go there at night, and I just, they taught me all these sports that I could play. I played floor hockey, I played basketball, I played soccer, and they kept you busy. And they always got these tickets to things, right? They took us to the Harlem Globetrotters. They took us
cool.
And the manager of the club said, here, take this camera and take pictures for us. So I'd go there, and I was taking pictures of the Harlem Globetrotters during intermission, and I'm from the Boys Club. Can I take your picture? I said, sure. And that's what it was like, Once the managers, they were having this special, little fair in the gym for all the kids, the members, right? And then he gave me $5. He says, well, go up to the store and, see if you can buy us some suckers for little prizes that we can give away, just something at the booths and that, So I went to the store, and I said to the manager, I says, well, I'm from the Boys Clubs of Canada. I have to buy some suckers. And he says, you're from where? I said, from the Boys Club. He said, well, just a minute. He goes to the bag, comes back with his box full of suckers. And he says, here. I give him the money. He says, no, you take them. They're free. And my God, I was a hero. Back, I took it to the manager, said, I give him his $5 back. He said, wow, I mean, it was no big deal. It was a big deal to him, but to me, I just thought, well, I got to play this for all that's worth and see what I can do for us.
Right.
I was pretty young.
Wow. What an interesting combination of experiences you just described. You have this home life where you're really, you're probably just in survival mode most of the time. living in fear, living in a really just unhappy and unsupportive, unnurturing environment. But fortunately, you met this friend whose family welcomed you into their home, and then you had this outlet with the boys club, which sounds like a bit of a lifesaver as well. Um, did you even, as a kid, did you even entertain ideas about, did you even fantasize about what you might want to do when you grew up? Or was it really just more a matter of day by day kind of getting by and surviving and just coping?
One of my big escapes was reading. I read books. I would read like, oh my God, I just couldn't stop reading because I was reading about the success of other people.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading about athletes, like mainly like runners, like from the old days, right? How they trained and, what it was like when they were in the Olympics and, how the races went and just their life stories. They're mostly biographies, right? And God, I kept thinking, God, I wish I could be like that. To have a success at anything so that like I mattered. I wanted to matter. That's what I wanted my life to become, to matter to somebody. Because if you don't matter to your family, like you're kind of lost when you're young. So I aspired, I guess, to, emulate them somehow.
Do you know why you were drawn specifically to biographies of athletes and runners, or like, was that mainly what appealed to you, or were there other biographies that caught your interest?
I don't know if you're familiar, but I read PT 109.
No.
PT 109 is the PT boat that President Kennedy was on during the war. And it was his story of World War II. And it made him one of my instant heroes.
Huh.
So, of course, I was in high school when he was assassinated. It was like, to me, devastating, right? But no, I read different books. I was reading classics at a very young age. Like I read Tom Sawyer in grade 5. I read Moby Dick in grade 6. And Moby Dick is a classic. That's hard to read. It's the Old English. But I read them. So I didn't know at the time, but my marks in English were my best, were really good. So, but there was no clue like what was going to happen. I remember they had an essay contest at the boys club. And I forget what the topic was, but you had to write like 200 words or something. And we were just like 12, 13 years old. But to me, I love to write. So I wrote, just what I thought, what I felt, and I won the contest. And nobody ever said to me, my English teachers at school, even at the club, they said, you might have a future in writing. Nobody ever said that. I mean, ever like one of those trigger moments that there was an opportunity there to plant that seed in my mind. So that came much later, an avenue. But I often think about, boy, if somebody had said something to me.
Wow, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I've pulled a bunch of quotes that were of interest to me from several of your books. And it was hard to narrow them down, but what you just said makes me want to read a quote from your book, When Running Is Not Enough, Discovering What You Are Truly Capable Of, which is more or less kind of like an autobiography, or certainly an autobiographical book. And you wrote in that book, through this whole life experience of the past 35 years, I have learned that we all have the ability to inspire others through our actions. And if there is one thing that is in short supply in the world, it's inspiration. I believe that Ironstruck still has the potential to help many, many people around the world. Once I was asked how I would describe what Ironstruck stood for in one short sentence. I didn't have to think about it very long because it has basically been the story of my life. And then the quote is, become more than you ever thought possible. One of the things that I love about your books is this. First of all, they're hugely inspiring to read, to pick up and read. I would almost, challenge someone read this and then like not be inspired, because it's just it's so, your books come so much from the heart, and they obviously come from your lived experience. And you point out in different books of yours the impact that a single person can make. And that's kind of what I was trying to pull from that quote, is that, you know, we all have the ability to inspire someone else, whatever our station is in life. A kind and encouraging word, you know, can make all the difference in the world to someone, you know, at just the right moment in their lives. And so that's something that I appreciate about you, and really agree with you on, that it is in short supply, and it can make a profound difference, not just in a child's life, certainly in a child's life, but in anyone's life. So you really did not receive that from any adult figures, it sounds like, growing up.
No, everything happened to me happened by mistake. I kind of stumbled on things that got me turned the right way, because there's no doubt in my mind that we're all products of our childhood environment in one way or another. I'm positive of that. I mean, they did a survey. I remember reading this about 10 or 15 years ago. They did a survey of maximum security prisons in the US. And we talked to some prisoners on that. It's something like 80% came from dysfunctional families. So dysfunctional childhood often leads to compulsive behavior that seems to intensify as you get older, right? Compulsive behavior, drinking, smoking, gambling, drugs, all like can be very destructive, right? And my premise is, why not, that I wrote in the book you just talked about, when running is not enough, why not turn that around and make your compulsions creative?
I love that.
Take that compulsive energy, instead of like, you know, drinking and drugs, and then getting into like theft and then crime and like and jail, you know, and destroying families, and just like turn it around and use it for something constructive. And I was on the way to following my father's footsteps, and I was like 27, like you just mentioned, right? When I saw that race in Montreal.
All right, let's back up just a bit for that, because you mentioned you following in your father's footsteps. So what did that look like? What, you know, if you could just even in brief describe the kind of lifestyle you were living in, let's say your teens and into your 20s, and how it may have mirrored your dad's behavior.
Started. Coffee tables were famous back then. TV tables, not coffee, TV tables, right? Those ones that fold. And my father always had one beside his chair. Now, he would go to work and he would go to the Legion and he'd get really drunk, and then he would come home and go to bed, and he'd get up early because he was a baker to go back to work. But he was always have a drink to get his day started at 3 a.m. And he always like rolled his own cigarettes. He smoked Players Plain or Export Plain, the harshest cigarettes in the world. And they were sitting on the table, and so was his booze. So one morning before school, I tried both. I said, well, it's good enough for my dad, might be good enough for me, right? And I was like in grade 8, grade 9. And that's kind of where I started. That's where I started smoking, was from that, you know. And then it just continued on. It just, as I got into my teens, you know, instead of staying with sports that I kind of loved, I kind of drifted away and went into more drinking. And by the time I was in my late 20s, I was still drinking and smoking. And that's what I was doing when I was watching the Olympics that day.
And how much, you know, how you give me a sense, or give us a sense of how much were you consuming? How much, like, what would be a typical, you know, day or week for you in terms of consuming alcohol, smoking cigarettes, just to give us an idea?
Oh, I was a 30 cigarette a day smoker, Rothman's king size.
That's pretty specific. Okay.
More than a pack a day. So a pack was 25 back then of a Rothman's king size. But I'll usually get into a second pack. And back then they were like 40 cents a package, right? It's not like you're not paying $12 like you are now, or $14, whatever it is. And And I would set pins in the bowling alley. That's how I earned my money. So I would, be able to buy my own stuff. Right. And as far as drinking, like my friend Joe and I, we would probably get drunk every weekend. First time I really got drunk was in his basement because his father made homemade wine all the time. And he had barrels of it down there. And he had boxes and boxes of golden wedding anniversary whiskey from his daughter's getting married. So we used to drink a lot. But as I got older, I was drinking pretty much all the time. And on a weekend, it wouldn't be unusual to, go through a dozen beer on a Saturday or Sunday, just to have that high, I guess. I was really going nowhere. I was going nowhere with my life. And actually, I don't know what would have happened. Like, I think I was on the road to self-destruction, to tell you the truth. If I hadn't have made that change, if I hadn't had that life-changing moment that kind of woke me up, because I always felt I had to do something, that this wasn't working, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't know. I needed a trigger point.
Yeah. Thanks for painting that picture. I think it really helps kind of set what's coming next, set the story in motion. And then what comes next is what I would call your superhero origin story. And as you said, you made a comment earlier that really struck me, which was that everything that happened to me happened by mistake. That's a powerful comment. But this particular, I don't know, I'm sure you wouldn't call it a mistake, but it was an unplanned bit of good fortune and happenstance. And that was when you happened to be sitting on the couch drinking, and you happened to be flipping the channels and stumbled upon what?
The Olympic marathon was in progress in Montreal, 1976. I remember the day perfectly. Like, I'm watching this race, and I remember Vladimir Sierpinski, he was East German, winning the race, and Frank Schurter was second. And I watched them come into the stadium, and 50,000 people in the stadium. And I thought, wow, that was, to me, so moving, right? Such an accomplishment. And I guess that's what I really wanted with my life. I wanted to accomplish something and be known for accomplishing something, and not always hiding because I didn't want people to see my family and didn't want anybody to know, and, becoming a loner, basically. I needed something. And that seemed to strike a chord with me. Gosh, I mean, what a feeling that must have been for them to accomplish something like that, right? It says, I wish I could do that. And maybe I could do that. And I think, I'm going to try and do that. And that's how that all evolved. So I made a commitment to myself. So this was July, I believe, the Olympics took place, 76. I made the commitment for January 1st. And I documented all this. I have old brown faded scrapbooks with all the training I did back then and where it started. That I would start training July 1st, and I was going to do my first marathon.
July 1st, or you said January or July?
Of 77.
Okay, yeah. First day of 77. Okay.
In the Olympics when I saw it. So
okay, interesting. So now there's obviously some months in between. So was that your way of kind of mentally prepping yourself?
Yeah, right away. I wanted the significant starting point, and to me, the turn of a new year seemed to be it.
Okay.
Right? I don't know why, but that just seemed to make sense to me. And I set my goal at the Calgary Marathon.
And when was that?
It was a lofty goal because it was in May. And I started running in January 1st. So we're talking 5 months. And from being a 30-pack a day smoker and a drinker, so going from ground zero to running a marathon in 5 months. And this is where the compulsive part comes in. Because now I was starting to use that dysfunctional childhood compulsive behavior in a positive manner. I was going to turn that compulsion around and be creative with it. I was going to run a marathon. So,
I'm curious about those months in between. So you set the goal. I understand why, January 1st, the significance of a new year, kind of a rebirth. You already had your sights set on the Calgary Marathon. Do you happen to remember the months in between, first being inspired in July of 76, were you still smoking and drinking just as much from then up until January 1st? Or like, do you have any memory of that time period?
No, pretty much the same. I planted that seed in my mind, and it kind of kept growing, right?
Interesting.
Kept growing over those weeks and months. And I just and I don't think that very day I was committed to doing that marathon in July, but that's when I planted the seed. Yeah, I think I can do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to try. But I couldn't go out the next day and start because I just wasn't too soon. Wasn't ready.
Okay.
This is a big transformation, right?
Sure.
So those 4 or 5 months leading up to the start, we're just kind of easing into this, right? And so, there's where, and, you're not always in a hurry to give up the things you've been doing.
Yeah, sure.
We try to quit smoking, for instance. Ask people who love their beer and their drinking. Ask them if they quit the next day. No, you have to ease yourself into that, right?
Yeah, I want to, if I can interrupt you for just a second, this was one of the most powerful passages for me in that same book, When Running Is Not Enough, that speaks to just what you're talking about. And I think it's worth sharing here. You wrote, "I have to admit that it was extremely hard to just give up smoking after all those years, but it was my goal to run a marathon that helped me make it through the nicotine withdrawal. To this day, I believe that it's not patches, pills, hypnosis, or acupuncture that are the surest ways to give up the smoking habit. It's the desire to do something or achieve something important that smoking makes difficult or impossible that is the most effective way of giving up the habit. In other words, what you are trying to accomplish provides more of a high and more of a reward than cigarettes ever will. It was all the inspiration I really needed to give up the habit."
There you go. But I had to try running first. So that's a good lead into what happened when I started. You got to remember that in the 70s, running wasn't a mainstream event. It was hardcore runners who were running marathons. It wasn't thousands of people going to a marathon. You'd have 40 or 50 or 60 people in a marathon.
Interesting.
So I was too ashamed to run outside because it seems funny, but I didn't know how to go about just running. You know what I mean? I didn't even know how to dress for it. This was truly starting in the very beginning. So I went to the North Y, we have a North YMCA, and they had a gym, and I ran around that gym. And I ran around that gym twice, and I couldn't run anymore because I was going, and I said, so I went out in the parking lot, I sat in the car, and I thought, well, this isn't going very good, but it can't get any worse than this. So I decided then I wanted to do this marathon, so cigarettes had to go. And within a week, I quit a 30 cigarette habit.
Wow.
Yeah. It took me a week. I cut down to, 20. I cut down to 10, cut down to 5 a day. And I said, this is crazy. I don't want to do this. And that was it. Boom.
You realized immediately that it was incompatible with your dream.
Oh,
and the dream won. I want to also just real quick, because this is something that I'm really passionate about. And if this helps anyone even consider quitting smoking, it's worth taking the time to read from the part that I just left off. Okay. Where you say it was all the inspiration I really needed to give up the habit. And then you write, "A few years ago, I saw this poster in my doctor's office. It stated that even after a week of not smoking, a person's lungs would begin to clear up. In a matter of months or weeks in some cases, the improvement in breathing and energy levels would be very noticeable. After 2 years and sometimes less, lungs would clear up and be pretty much as healthy as they were before one began to smoke. I believe that by running and quitting smoking at the same time, I accelerated the recovery process, and the difference in the way I felt was nothing short of incredible."
Yep. I got up to 5 miles in that gym. That's 240 times around that gym. That's a lot of corners.
How long did that take?
That took about 3 or 4 weeks, and I was at 5 miles in the gym.
Not bad at all.
Right. So I said, well, I got to take this outside now. That's enough of this. And then I started running on the trails. And I said, the heck with that. I don't care anybody thinks I'm running, right? And, back then you might as well carry a hubcap under your arm because a cop thinks you're stealing something anyway. Like.
Why are you running? What are you running from? Yeah.
But, I didn't care. I started running, and soon my 5 miles became 10, and 10 became 15, and then it became like 3 hours. Like, I was taking my compulsive personality to a whole new level, in a whole new direction. And truly, this was compulsive behavior, like the way I attacked running. And it's still, everything I do is still compulsive at 73 years old. And back then I was like 26, 27. I was just starting out.
Interesting insight, though, that you basically understood that about your personality and you accepted it, and you decided, why not use this trait that I have, this characteristic, in an intentional and positive way, rather than try to eliminate being compulsive, rather than try to stop being something that is seemingly an integral part of your personality. You just redirected it.
Yeah. And it worked. 5 months later, as a start line of the Calgary Marathon, I finished that race in 3 hours and 28 minutes, which,
wow,
I thought, years later, I realized how good that time was under the circumstances, how fast that was. I mean, I did the halfway split. I was in like a 240 something pace. I was so excited. That I went out like a bullet. And of course, you don't do that in a marathon. And I thought, oh my God, I was so fast. And then boom, I hit the wall. But, my first experience of the invisible wall. But I kept moving, I kept running slow and crossed the line in 3:28. So that was the beginning. Within a year, I had done a 10K in 35:28. So
did you have anyone to share these initial accomplishments with, and or did you bond with any other people who were doing the same thing?
Oh yeah, and that's the beauty of sports, of anything you take up, is that you join a community. You're not really alone. Like there were Calgary Roadrunners, and that was the name of the club, who were hardcore marathoners and runners who helped me a lot, right? Because now I was getting some recognition that I was kind of looking for. Like I was working now. It was just all I ever wanted, right? Basically, it became sort of a family, right? No different than triathlon and the Ironman. You become part of something really special. And yeah, so I had lots of people to share the experience with, no doubt, and I would run with some of them, train with some of them. Most of the time I trained alone. The loneliness of the long distance runner, because you are free to do what you want, when you want, run as far as you want, as slow as you want, as fast as you want. Because there is a set rule. It was, at least with the Roadrunners, that if you're running with a group, you only run as fast as the slowest runner.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of times, like a lot of the guys couldn't do that. And after a while, I couldn't do that because it was too slow from what I wanted to run. Right.
When you trained, though, for the initial marathon that you ran in Calgary, had you hooked up yet with the Calgary Roadrunners, or did you do that completely on your own? And if so, either way, how did you even know what to do? How to train for something like that? Was it just instinctive that or did you have any kind of guidance?
Most of it was instinctive. I just kept running with no particular goal in mind, except I wanted to do a marathon. I knew how long the marathon was, how far it was, and that if I couldn't get close to that distance in training, I wasn't going to do it in the race. So
right. So you were just working your way up into longer and longer distances.
Yeah. About a month of running, then I got a hold of somebody from the Roadrunners on the phone. I phoned them. They had a number in the phone book for the club, and I told them what was going on, and I wanted to run a marathon. And said, "You can do the Calgary Marathon?" I said, "Yeah," and gave me a lot of insight into training and that kind of thing. And so it kind of gave me a direction, right? So I suppose that's where it all started.
Do you remember how it felt to finish that first marathon?
oh, like amazing. And that guy who helped me, he says he couldn't believe it. He said, like, holy smokes. He won the race, this particular guy that I talked to, he won it. But I remember before the half, you kind of cross paths because it was a circular course, right? Out and back sort of thing. So he was leading the race coming this way and I was going the other way. And his eyes just went like saucers when he saw me. I thought, I wonder what that's about. But it's because he said later, I couldn't believe where you were in the race because I was like, he said, I was sub 3 hours at that, but I wasn't at the halfway quite yet, right? So like I was really running fast, way too fast, right? So he just went, oh my God. So I talked to him after, but he said, yeah, but your finish time was, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I'll say that's pretty good for someone who didn't have a history of smoking on the first time out. So how did things progress from there?
Well, then I was on my way. I started to run races all the time. I was running 10K races. It was when I ran sub 36 in a 10K. We used to go to Seaside, Oregon in February.
To give people a sense of that, what does that amount to in terms of the average per mile pace?
Oh, gee, what is that?
I mean, we could easily calculate it, but if you happen to know off the top of your head.
5:40, I'm thinking.
Wow. Okay. That's so 5 minutes 40 seconds average mile pace.
A 10K is 6.2 miles. So
right.
5-minute mile.
Yeah, that's fast, people. That's really fast.
600 mile would be 36. Well, I was under 36. So I would say around a 5:40, 5:50 maybe, 5:55. If I looked up on a graph, that's probably what
okay.
Right. It was kind of the second tier. Like you had your guys who would win at 30, 31, 32. And then you had your runners that could go 34, 35, 36. And a majority of your runners went 39, 40, 41 and up.
Yeah, it's definitely up.
We'll never see under 40 minutes for a 10K. The same as I would never see under 3 hours for a marathon, right? It just was a bridge too far for a lot of people, right? It's the same as 31 minutes was a bridge too far for me. I would have to run like a 5:10, 5:15 mile for 6, and then you're talking about Olympic caliber. Some of these guys were national class. We're winning in 30, 31 minutes. That's pretty fast time.
Yeah. So you obviously got hooked. You started racing all the time, as you said, and pretty competitively, right?
Yeah. I never did it just to be part of the event. I did it to do as well as I could every race. And to me, that was the fun part. To me, that was the enjoyable part, is beating that clock. And then if I ran 2 seconds faster than you, I would beat you because I was running as fast as I could. And if you were there in front of me and I was going fast, I would pass you. I was just running as fast as I could against the clock, right? Every race, that's how I raced, and it wasn't really the best way to race. I found out later, it took me a long time to figure out that you don't always go full speed ahead in the beginning.
One of the things that I found really fascinating about this autobiographical book of yours, When Running Is Not Enough, is that you go into great detail describing your process over the course of decades of experimentation with different approaches to training and different techniques and ideas that you implemented, all in an effort to try to, I look at you as someone who is an explorer of your own potential, and that's what you were doing. And some of it didn't matter how outlandish some of these strategies might have been. Like you were fully committed, like I'm going to do this. And you made some mistakes that you kind of learned the hard way. But again, this is part of why you have so much wisdom to share with runners from your own sort of experiments in the laboratory of your own life and potential. And you've done so many styles of training for a race, and often they involved overdoing it.
Right. I was going to say, and not everything you did was the right way to do things. It's just was the way I was doing it and the way I saw it at the time. There was one year in particular, and I used to keep a calendar of every day that I ran, how much I ran for the whole year, that I ran every day except Christmas Day. Every day, 7 days a week, every day. Wow. An off day, I would run just 5 miles. It would be kind of my rest day, right? And it went up to 3.5, 4 hours in my longer runs, right? Totally the wrong thing to do, but that's being compulsive, right? And one day I was devastated because something happened to one of my knees, right? I says, oh my God, now what? What did I do? Because like running was everything now, right? So somebody said, there's this new doctor in town. He's doing this experimental kind of surgery. You should go talk to him. So I phoned this number, and his nurse secretary answered the phone and said, I think it was like a Thursday. And she said, can you come in tomorrow? Yeah. I thought a specialist, that would be like a month, right? He said, well, bring your running shoes, come on in. So I took my running shoes, and he looked at my shoes to look at the wear and everything. And he found at my knee, and he said, well, you got to have surgery. How's Monday? Friday. Now we're talking Monday. So this is like 4 days of elapsed since I first talked to this person. And it turns out he was doing arthroscopy, and he was one of the pioneers of, at least in Western Canada, of the arthroscopy, which is basically they put you to sleep. They put 2 tiny incisions in your knee and put a scope into your knee and look at your inside of your knee. And what he found was meniscus had, from so much running, had pressed out. And he also had an instrument can trim it off and pull it out through that small incision, right? So I woke up and I had 2 Band-Aids on my knee. And he said, don't forget, up until then, it was a crescent cut and they open your knee up. And you're looking at 6 months. You're looking at crutches. You're looking at all that crap, right? So I had 2 Band-Aids on my knee, and I talked to the dog. He said, well, he said, don't run for about 4 days. And I said,
what are you supposed to do with yourself? 4 whole days.
4 days. And I thought, oh my God. So I did a marathon 6 weeks later in 3:12.
Oh my God. Wow. That's unbelievable.
So the reason I got in so fast is as soon as I told her I was a marathoner, she said, yeah, come on in, because he wanted to do athletes. That's why I got in, right?
You were practice for him.
Yes, exactly. And so they asked for feedback a few months later. Says, yeah, I ran the marathon like 6 weeks. He says, wow, this is what we want to know, right? And then I had the other knee done a year later by his protege. So I had both knees scoped. Never had a problem with those knees since.
Unbelievable. That's really amazing.
Yeah, now that's a commonplace surgery, right? NFL football players, hockey players, they do elbows, they do knees, or whatever. It's no more cutting your knee open unless it's something really serious. But for most of them, they could just do an arthroscopy. Arthro, that's what it is.
You must have been so grateful.
Oh my God, I just had this vision of, well, that's it for my running career for like a year or something, right? But no, to me, that was miraculous.
So the next major milestone, and if I'm wrong about this, correct me, but the next major milestone in your career as with endurance racing came in what I might call a second superhero origin story that you experienced. So you had been running for how many years before you caught the Ironman on TV for the first time in 1982?
That would be
5 years.
So there were 7 years between my Ironman. Yeah, so 5 years, because I didn't do the Ironman. Like I saw it in 82. I did it in 84.
All right. So tell me about what happened when you saw the ABC Wide World of Sports broadcasting the Ironman for the first time.
Well, I went for a run, like I always do, and I came back, and I was kind of a fan of Wide World of Sports. The agony of defeat and all that, right? But
the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat.
Exactly. And they were doing coverage of this race, which I had never heard of. And I thought, oh, we're covering a marathon, right? Because they were showing runners. And then I kept watching and I kept watching. And I says, and then they start talking about this race that they had swam 2.4 miles and biked 112 miles. And now they were doing the marathon. I thought, oh my God. Like I knew how hard the marathon, what I had to do. What? And I'm watching these people cross the finish line, and just the looks on their faces, and that they weren't all perfect athletes, perfect idea of what you would think would be doing the most difficult at the time, the most difficult race in the world, easily was the Ironman at that time in 84.
82, right?
82, yeah. And I said, I got to go there. That was my first thought. I got to go there. And so right there was my commitment already. I was going to Hawaii. Like I had made that day, right? And so, of course, I didn't go in 83. That was a bit too soon because I couldn't swim a stroke. And that's where the next part of this compulsive behavior came in, because I had to learn how to swim. And I just got a coach to show me the rudimentary stroke and how to do the front crawl.
And how old are you now at this point?
34 in 1983. Because I did, the race was 35. I was 35. So yeah, 34 when I started into the real training for it.
What did it take? My understanding is that you went to your local pool, right? The same Y where you had initially done those laps around the gym, right? And you took just a beginner's swim class. And were you in the class with kids, or what was or was it for adults or?
By myself, but what she was giving, it was just a personal training, right?
I see.
She was giving me what they would have given a kid.
Right.
Bob and hold your nose. Let go of the side of the pool and bob and hold your nose. So you would get used to the water. I could not swim a stroke. I was actually afraid of the water, right? If I remember correctly, back when I was quite young, an ant pulled me out of the water, or I almost drowned or something. So that probably had something to do with this fear, right? That sort of built in. So she worked with me, and finally I got so I could do a length in the pool, 25 meters, right? Which at the beginning was impossible because I was afraid to let go of the side of the pool. And what was it? Well, if you want to be an Ironman, you're going to have to let go of the side of the pool.
That's like step number one.
Step number one. And there it began. And this is where the compulsive behavior really helped me, because I went back to the pool. I went back to a pool every day, 5-6 days a week, and kept swimming and swimming. I said, eventually I'm going to get this. And going until I got up to 2 miles in the pool, which took me 9 months, 10 months. And we had just opened a sports center here, Lindsay Park, back in around 83, I think it opened. And they had a 50-meter pool. And I've been training mostly in 25-meter and even a 20-meter pool. When I saw that 50-meter pool, I thought, oh my God, that's a long ways without having anything to hang on to.
That's right? An Olympic size, right?
Size, yeah. That was an Olympic pool. Yeah, they had a lot of Olympic athletes trained in that pool. So that was my first experience of swimming a really long way to me, and that was good training because it got me more used to being. But that was basically it. I learned.
Looking back, if I may interrupt, looking back, Ray, you were obviously, it was a similar experience, I think, seeing the Ironman on TV as it was seeing that initial Olympic marathon race on TV. The key difference, though, being the condition you were in, because here, when you saw that marathon, it was probably people on the outside would think this is a far-fetched goal for you, being a heavy smoker and drinker and sedentary lifestyle person, to go from that to tackling a marathon right away. But how much did the experience you had accumulated and built, and perhaps self-confidence that you had built up during the years in between, seeing that first marathon on TV versus, getting to the Ironman. Would you say that the Ironman seemed less impossible to you as a goal than that first marathon, or not? Like, how did you experience it when you obviously were immediately ironstruck, to use your own coined word, but how did those experiences compare for you?
They were both seemingly impossible. The only advantage of Ironman was that I knew I could run a marathon.
Right.
But I didn't know how I could run a marathon if I couldn't swim. Right. Like I had to, like in the Ironman, swimming is a necessary evil. And a lot of people who do the Ironman aren't swimmers.
Yeah, that's what usually actually frightens a lot of people off from even attempting not just the Ironman, but triathlons in general, right? Because most people, going into them, they have experience maybe with running, maybe with cycling, but usually the swim is what is the intimidating factor for a lot of people, not everyone, but that's usually the thing that has to be conquered in order for someone to then do a triathlon.
Well, because you have no control. We're out of our element. And if you're on a bike, you can stop. You can get rid of what you want. You can lay down in the grass. I mean, you can do what you want. Same with running. But swimming, you can go one direction. Well, you can go two directions. You can go down, or you can keep going straight. That's how I looked at it, right? Yeah. So it was like, no, it was daunting, but exciting in a way too, right?
Sure.
I think I had showed myself that, like, the fact that I could do that marathon gave me more confidence that I could conquer the swimming part, and that I was going to go to Hawaii. And I called them in '83 and I said, well, I want to do the Ironman from Canada. Sent me an entry form and said, you're a foreign contestant, you're in, which is what they did. In 1984, you could get in that category without qualifying, just by being a foreign contestant. And they were brilliant in that marketing that they used, because that opened up the Ironman to the world. Because, you see, there was no internet. Nobody had cell phones. He didn't have any of that stuff, right? So a lot of it was word of mouth and, media or whatever. And so you had the Japanese there, you had the Germans, the Australians, the Canadians, the Americans, the New Zealanders, all converged. I think every Ironman in the world at the time was in Kona that year, because that was like the race, right? There weren't races at home. There weren't Ironman races you could drive.
Did they do Ironman? Did they stage Ironman races elsewhere in the world at that time, or was it just Kona?
I believe one was starting in Japan, Lake Biwa, in around there somewhere in the 80s. Ironman Canada was just kicking off in the early 80s as well. I believe it actually started 82 or 83, but I haven't heard about it. All I'd heard about, because like I say, there was no way of hearing.
People knew about the Ironman from TV, from seeing the Ironman Hawaii. Yeah.
So, it was like Hawaii or stay home at the time, right? Basically. So, to make a long story short, I found myself on a Ward Air flight winging my way to Oahu and then on over to Kona. Yeah. There it was.
When in reading your story, one of the things that strikes me is, yes, you did have a background. You were a strong runner at that point, and you were an accomplished marathoner at that point. But the Ironman was so new, and unlike today, where there are resources like the ones that you have created for people, with all kinds of incredibly detailed information about how to prepare for something like this, there was nothing out there, right? So you show up and you're attempting to do something that most people look at as, that's kind of impossible for most, like maybe a few select, freakishly athletic people in the world could do something like this. But being a more or less average person, I mean, you're a runner, but you're going into this race. I'm interested to know, number one, how terrified were you? and how, you obviously prepared as best you could, but how did you feel showing up in Kona, especially the morning of the race?
I questioned my sanity for even being. I questioned I belong there. And you're exactly right. I had nothing to guide me. Like, you couldn't go on Google and Google Ironman training. I mean, there was no Google. There was nothing.
Right.
You couldn't go to the bookstore and find a triathlon book. There weren't any. There were no diets. There was nobody coaching Ironman because nobody knew anything about triathlon, really, basically. A few people. Diet, like, was so important, and we didn't have it. So we got there, and on a hope and a prayer. Like, I took my $300 piece of steel bike. You know, we had look pedals that hadn't been invented that you snap into. Aero bars were not invented yet. None of that was invented. There was no titanium. There was not in bikes anyway. There was nothing. I mean, you wouldn't be caught dead doing an Ironman in the bike I had there at the time. Now, like, oh my God, it's too heavy, right? Probably weighed 6 or 7 times what a triathlon bike should weigh now, because you're pushing that piece of metal a long way.
Yeah. So you questioned your sanity, but you were going to do it. You were going to give it your best, right? Tell me a little bit about the race experience. I know you could probably, because you know this, because this is so etched in your memory, and you even wrote a novel based on your memories of the day and all the experiences that you had, which is a really fun read, by the way. That's the book that's called It's Kona Calling.
People have to read that book, because that's exactly what the race was like, because the characters in the book are doing the race that I did. So everything about the race day itself is authentic. It's just right. Our characters I invented, but I think I made them pretty real.
Yeah. And it was fun because I read this not too long after reading your autobiographical book, and it was really fun to compare your personal experiences with what you fictionalized in the book. And, you know, I could, because it was fresh in my mind what your experience was. I knew kind of what was taken directly from your own experiences, and what was embellished or, you know, even, fantasized about, perhaps, or, you know, that's the liberty you can take as a novelist, is you can weave the story in any way that you wish. And one of the things that really cracked me up, I wouldn't mind if you would describe for us, is during your experience in the race in 1984, tell us about the on the bike, when you witness a young Hawaiian woman in a grass skirt, and she's going to hand you a sponge because it was a brutally hot day, right? Brutally hot. Crazy hot.
It was at the time, for a long time after that, one of the hottest Ironman races on record. And even for Hawaii, for Kona, they were in a heat wave, and it was over 100 degrees. And of course, I used absolutely all my energy in the swim, because the way I survived the swim is going as fast as I could without stopping, or else I would sink. That was my thing. But anyway, so I, you know, and the heat was so bad that when I'm cycling, I could see the heat waves bouncing off the asphalt, and they were like way up here, 3 or 4 feet high. You know, you could see that. You know, like, oh my God. And so I was really starting to lose it early on in the race, in the bike, and I saw this aid station coming up, and I see this beautiful Hawaiian girl with a grass skirt and the leis around her neck, right, and the wreath in her hair, holding out what I thought was a sponge. And I grabbed it and I went to slap it against the back of my neck, and realized it wasn't a sponge. It ends up a guava jelly sandwich on brown bread. Like, the first time I had guava jelly, by the way, but
not the way it was intended to be had.
Yeah, people say that really happened. Says, yeah, that really happened, because you had to be there. You had to see the condition people were in. You had to see, even halfway through the bike, people were just laying on the side of the road. I mean, it was that, you know. So yeah, that happened.
Yeah. So what was fun though? So knowing that about knowing, having, you know, read that experience that you shared, it was fun to then read your fictionalized account, and the main character, as he's going through the bike course, you got to kind of play God in a sense and correct that experience for your character, where he grabs what he thinks is a sponge and he's just about to do exactly what you did. And at the last millisecond, he realizes, oh, wait, it's a sandwich, and he eats it.
Oh, yeah, that was Sam. So, yeah.
So, that was, by all accounts and everything I've read about you, that experience and you actually did complete the 84 Hawaii Ironman race. And that was a really pivotal moment in your life for sure. How would you say that experience changed you?
No doubt it gave me so much more confidence on a lot of different levels about a lot of different things, not just racing, because then I realized, maybe for the first time, if we go back, that I become more than I ever thought possible. The last line of this book. And that's where I got that from, because it happened to me. I thought, wow. And, it took me like 14 hours and some 20 minutes. I didn't care. I mean, there were some people out there for 17. It didn't matter. Not a bit. Like, people wanted to reach that finish line any way they could. And that was my goal. And it's funny because there was only 1,000, I believe, 40 people in that race. Right now, there's 2,000 every year. That's the limit for Kailua Bay. Like, it's not very big, the harbor. And back then, they set the limit at 1,000, but there was a bit of a carryover, so they had a few extra that they would let in the race at the last minute. So we got really spread out in the race. And when I was coming back in through Kona, through the village, and made that last turn onto Alihi Drive, all kinds of people there, unbelievable. And the lights were shining. And I remember watching on TV and people running under these bright lights. And I said, boy, I got to do that. I got to reach that finish line. That was I knew right then, boy, I got to do this. And I turned that corner, and about, maybe 200 meters away or 200 yards, I saw those same lights, and it was the ABC camera lights over the finish line. And I was all alone. I mean, I'm sure there was somebody 20, 30 seconds in front of me and somebody 20, 30 seconds behind me, but there was nobody with me. It was just me when I came down Alihi Drive. And I thought, my God, I felt like I'd won the race. And in a lot of ways I did,
That's powerful.
And I crossed the finish line, and I think it was Valerie Silk. I'm pretty sure, blonde lady, who was one of the early organizers who gave me my medal and gave everybody a medal when they crossed the finish line in their T-shirt. And I went and had my Bud Light beer that was everywhere.
Because they were a sponsor, right?
But it was transformational, because I had actually booked 3 weeks in Kona, 2 weeks before the race, and then do the race, and then a week after. But I found that everybody left Kona, probably the Monday after the awards. And I thought, well, I think I'll go to Oahu. So I talked to the people at Des. Yeah, we have a sister hotel in Oahu that you can just change your reservation to them. So I booked a flight to Oahu, changed my flight home, Oahu to Calgary. And the first day, I'm up you can suntan up on the roof, right? So I'm up there. And I was just such a high. I was on a high no drug could ever put you. And I was on that high for probably a year.
Wow.
It was, honest to God, it was just amazing. And you had to be there. You had to be into the atmosphere, and how difficult that was, and
how still unusual and new it was, really. It was not an experience many people had.
Yeah. Oh, a handful of people in the world then. And even now, not many people do the Ironman. You think a lot are, but really in the big scheme,
percentage-wise, yeah, right.
But anyway, I go up to the sun deck, and there was this beautiful blonde girl suntanning there, and I'm just suntanning, and I thought something I never would have done. Never would have done in a million years. I started talking to her because I was kind of an introvert. And before that conversation was over, I asked her out for dinner that night, and she said yes. She's from Vancouver, right? And I'll never forget it. We went to a place called Bobby McGee's. We had this beautiful dinner, a beautiful girl, had pictures taken with us. And, we went to the international marketplace and had pictures taken with the parakeets that sit on your shoulders. Just amazing. And this was only a week after the Ironman, or even a matter of days. I think it was 5 or 6 days after the Ironman. And this is like what happens, right? It gives you more confidence. It gave me more confidence to, hey, I'm worth something. There's something to me other than, burying my head in the pillow and crying myself to sleep every night.
Wow.
I mean, maybe what I was looking for. And so that began my Ironman career.
Yeah, that's amazing, Ray. It's just awesome to hear. Also, it's awesome to hear it from you directly. I want to share, because I know we've talked about this a little bit before we got started, that one of the things that makes these races unique and especially powerful, I think, for let's call them the average person that participates in a marathon, in a big city marathon, let's say, and certainly in something like an Ironman race. The thing that's so unusual about it compared with, most sporting events is that the average person, or anyone that's participating in the event, is, in a sense, you're doing the event with the best in the world that are also there the same day, doing the same thing on the same course at the same time. And there's something really powerful about that. And to speak to that a little bit, I'm just going to pull a quote from your book. It's Kona Calling. So this is the fictional account, but it really kind of speaks to this. And then I'd like to hear from you on this subject. So the protagonist's name in your book is Sam. Sam had lived vicariously through star athletes like this for years. He often wondered what it must be like to reach such lofty heights. He had dreamt of doing something great so many times. When he watched high-level athletes on television, he would pretend in his mind that it was him. He was always in awe of them. Today, he wasn't in awe, and it surprised him. As he passed within feet of this great athlete, he realized why. He wasn't in awe because they were both doing all they could to reach the same finish line. Sam was battling the very same torrid heat and diabolical winds. To realize his goal, he would have to traverse every single inch of the race course that this incredible pro athlete had to. So what if it took him longer? Does the spirit sing less passionately for those who give all they have to finish as it does for those who give all they have to win? No, 1,000 times no. As he passed within feet of the leader of the race, and that would have been coming the other direction, right? Sam realized that despite the divergent roles they played as pro and age group athletes, they were in many, many ways brothers in arms.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful passage.
Yeah, that's true. And every Ironman race you ever do, there's always people better. There's always people, maybe pros, whatever, people faster in your age group, but none of that matters. You're all on the same journey. That's why the title of my very first book, Ironstruck, the Ironman Triathlon Journey, because that's what it is. We can't all win the race, obviously, but we can all certainly win, right?
Yeah, and you also make a point of in that book of pointing out that just showing up, just doing everything that it takes to show up at the starting line of an Ironman race is a win. And one of the things I loved about your book, many things I loved about your book, was you actually have a whole chapter that speaks to, it's towards the end of the book, and I think it's called "So You Didn't Finish."
Oh yeah.
And I'm going to pull it. I have my copy right here. So I'm gonna look it up so I get your exact words, because I thought that it was pretty cool. Yeah. So you wrote here, some people tend to become very depressed when the race doesn't turn out as they hoped. They go home wondering how they will explain this to everyone who asks them how the Ironman went. You don't really owe explanations to anyone, but if you must answer, there is one best answer. Here it is. The Ironman is a tough race. That's what makes it special. If it was easy, where would the challenge be? Hopefully at this point, you tell that person you intend to try as many times as it takes to reach that finish line. And I got to just share the rest of this because it's so cool. If anything, not reaching the finish line the first time or several times you try the race should be incentive to return until you succeed. Any race is a learning experience that will help propel you to the finish line the next time. I had an email from an athlete who had failed 5 times to reach the finish line and was finally successful in his 6th attempt. Now, to me, he is the true definition of an Ironman.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I want to interject just a little bit of my own story and how our paths first connected, because I, in an extremely unlikely turn of events, never having been an athlete and never having been particularly interested in athletics and never even really knowing what the hell the Ironman even was. When I moved to Los Angeles in a warmer climate and being able to be outdoors year round and a kind of, culture of people interested in health and fitness, I found myself, I bought a mountain bike and just started riding my bike to the beach and just really enjoying being outside on my bike, really for the first time, probably since I was a kid and had a paper route. And from there, I just progressed very, very gradually into trying things and expanding my horizons. And I signed up for a short distance triathlon and didn't know how to swim and was totally ill prepared. Couldn't swim in the open water, I should say. Anyway, I kept, after having experience after experience, I kept asking, I kept thinking, oh, wow, that was so incredible. I wonder what else I could do. And then I would try something a little bolder. And eventually I did what they call the Ironman 70.3, which is a half Ironman distance. So it's all the same disciplines, except you cut them in half. It's a 1.2 mile swim, a 56 mile bike, and then a 13.1 mile run. I thought that was the most extreme thing that I would ever even consider doing in my entire life. And I trained for it really hard for 8 months, had an amazing experience on race day, and never intended on doing anything beyond that. But as you know, this stuff really gets under your skin and hooks you in. And I thought to myself, well, if I ever were to attempt a full Ironman, if I'm ever going to do this in my life, now would be the time, because I have all this momentum going. I've just done the half distance. I'm in peak condition, and you have to sign up for these races a year in advance because they sell out. So days after I signed up for my first Ironman, which was Ironman Arizona, somehow I found your book Ironstruck online. And this is, I found the actual email that I received dated April 3rd, 2007. That was an automatic email. You were selling your book off of a site called Lulu. This was even before any of your books were available on Amazon. I don't even know how much Amazon was a presence in terms of book selling at that point. I don't know, but I'm sure it was. But what you did was you had an automated email that went out to anyone that purchased your book. I don't know if you remember that. And this is what the email says. It says, "This book is small but mighty. It includes 30 years of endurance training and racing experience and 22 years involvement with triathlon, and especially the Ironman triathlon. It is all that I have learned on the Ironman highway, good and bad, and its sole purpose is to pass that knowledge on so the Ironstruck people of the world can realize their dream of reaching that amazing finish line. Maybe people doubt you can do this, or perhaps you doubt yourself. Maybe you don't think you're enough of an athlete. Forget all that. Now you have Ironstruck on your side, and the impossible dream is going to come true for you. Thank you so much for supporting Ironstruck, the book. Good luck and Godspeed to all of you, and contact me anytime you like if I can be of help. Signed, Ironman Ray. Well, I took you up on that. I started training and I didn't really know what I was doing. I had only used a mountain bike, even in that 70.3 race. I was comfortable on a mountain bike because you're in a more upright seated position. It's not aerodynamic. It's not really like recommended for any sort of distances. So I think the first email I sent you was like, I have a mountain bike. Can I do the Ironman using a mountain bike? And you wrote me back, and I would write to you from time to time and update you on my progress, or if I had a question. And you were amazing, Ray. Like you were always so responsive and so super encouraging, and always willing to share whatever knowledge you had or suggestions you had. But the thing that I took most from my correspondences with you were just, you were there on my side, rooting for me and encouraging me, and sort of trusted that I would figure it out. It actually took me 3 attempts before I finished an Ironman. The first attempt was Ironman Arizona. The second one was a race called Ironman St. George, which was at the time, perhaps they thought the hardest Ironman in North America. I didn't know that. I just signed up for it. It was a new race. I thought I could drive to Utah. And then finally I did a race called Vineman, and I'm wearing my finisher shirt. There it is. For those who are watching this, they can see this. When I finally finished, and of course I reached out to you after each experience, and you always wrote something really beautiful back. And you, when I finally, in fact, the email, when I did finish after my third attempt, the email subject was finally, and you wrote me back and said, "Aloha, Ironman Eric. You did all the work. I just provided a bit of encouragement. Sometimes all you have to do is believe in people and they can do the rest. The best part is that you are an Ironman forever and nobody can take that away from you, Ironstruck Ray." So I want to just personally thank you for just who you are in the world and your support of people out there like myself, and I know countless others. And I'm interested to hear from you, because you, if you want to speak more to your own experiences. I know that you actually showed up at the start line of 14 different Ironman races, and 3 of those did not result in reaching the finish line. So you've personally had that experience as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What do you have to say? I'm just curious to hear your reflections. You could either describe what happened when you didn't make it to the finish line, and maybe what lessons you've learned, or things you would share with someone who is considering doing an Ironman but has all kinds of doubts and fears about it.
Just the Ironman in its its makeup, it's so complex. There's so many working parts that so much can go wrong. That, I mean, I actually went back to Hawaii in 1986 and way more prepared, better trained, better bike, whatever. Even had look pedals on my bike, so I didn't have to use those cages. And then got food poisoning at a 3-race event. And that was it for me. I'm allergic to shellfish. And I didn't realize that they have beautiful food there. And don't get me wrong, nothing wrong with the food. They had like top-notch hotel chefs and amazing food. And of course, I had my pasta, and I had this looks like interesting sauce. I put it on, and it was clam sauce. And I got sick right after. And I realized as soon as it happened what I'd done, I says, oh my God. And that's a key part of my book. Even in Ironstruck, I mentioned that. Watch what you eat. Get a motel with a kitchenette. Make your own meal.
Don't take any chances.
Don't
do things differently. Don't do things differently than you did in training, whether it's nutrition wise or strategy wise, right?
Yeah. So these are all learning experiences. And through every time, another time I went into a race, I had plantar fasciitis, and I knew it going in. I'd already cortisone shot with the biggest needle in the world in my knee, or in my heel, right? And the doctor said, if this still hurts in the run, just drop out, right? Because even though you got cortisone, you could do more damage. So just, so I had entered, it was Ironman Canada. And, to my way of thinking, yeah, I'm still part of the event. I get to enjoy everything, the expo and the people, did the swim, did the bike, made it about 8 miles in the run. And that was it. I just started to flare up. I said, I was good with it, because not finishing an Ironman is never a wasted effort, because all the training you've done is just such a positive effect on your life. And no matter what you do, right? Whatever your career is, or whatever your standing in life is, like, you can't go wrong with the training you did getting ready for an Ironman, whether you finish or not. You yours for yourself, for your family, people around you, because you're going to be healthier. Supposedly, you should live longer, I would think. Everything you do is positive. And you can always go back and try again, which I did, always go back and do it again, So
it's beautifully said. And it's a reminder that it is a journey. And really, in a sense, the race is kind of, the icing on the cake, because it's the whole process of starting from wherever you were, whatever condition you were in, and, having the experience of changing yourself, transforming yourself into someone that is, able to show up at the start line of a race. And, there are things that happen that may be out of your control. As you pointed out, there's so many different variables, so many things that can go wrong, but just to get yourself in the kind of condition you need to be in to even attempt it is a huge, huge personal win and transformation. I remember at the Ironman Arizona race that I did, and I'm at this is my first experience at an Ironman race, and I'm at the athlete dinner, and I'm seated at this table with a bunch of guys, and they're like unbelievably buff, super strong, built, muscular, the manliest men you've ever seen. And I'm at this table with them, and they're trading stories. And I have this moment, of like sort of this out of body experience, like, what in the hell am I doing here? Like, how did I get here? This is crazy. How am I, and then I like checked myself, and I'm like, no. I worked for this. Like, I earned my seat at this table. I trained for the last year, not to mention prior to that, building up to my 70.3 race, no, I earned my right to be here. And it's that point, is that you're having your own experience and your own transformation. And each person there, whatever their natural ability or whatever their standing is, they're there to do the best they can, to challenge themselves and to do the absolute best they can, and to become greater than they were. And it doesn't even matter where you are in that hierarchy, right, in terms of standing or place or finish time or anything like that. And that really makes it special. And there's a certain, at least in my experience, camaraderie doing these kinds of races, where everyone's out there supporting each other, encouraging each other. And I'll never forget what it meant to me when I would see some of the pros, like I would be, let's say, doing a bike loop, and I would encounter a pro who was, let's say, a full loop ahead of me, but he would see me and he'd be like, keep it up, or like, you're doing great, or whatever. Like, and it means the world. It just lifts your morale so much to get that kind of like, acknowledgement and encouragement from someone who is one of the best in the world doing this thing. It's pretty special.
That's why I even wrote a chapter called "You Doubt Yourself" in Ironstruck, talking just about what you talked about. Well, let's see. No matter what happens, something pretty amazing happened. You were Ironstruck. Something moved you about this event, and a spark was ignited and brought about a stunning metamorphosis. Well, look at you now. You have certainly come a long, long way. You're most likely in the best shape of your life. You have a better understanding of diet, nutrition, training, and resting, and of sacrifice and accomplishment. You're already a new, improved version of yourself, and as a result, that's something very special for those who you care about, and who care about you. All this, and you have yet to start the race. So this is at the start line. This is why I wrote this. No matter what happens, don't doubt yourself because you're at the start line. You've done amazing things to get there, right? Whatever happens, race day happens. You can come back and do it again. You can be satisfied with your effort. You did the best you could, but through it all, you've done amazingly well to get to the start line of an Ironman anywhere in the world.
Beautiful. So just to get back to your story, you've had this pretty remarkable career, decades-long career of running competitively, not professionally, but certainly competitively. You've had major achievements and accomplishments along the way. Plus, you've learned a tremendous amount about not only how to train and how to prepare for athletic events, but you've learned a tremendous amount about yourself. And it ultimately really is a process of self-discovery. You've learned about your own potential. You've pushed the limits of your own abilities as far as they can go. And you determined, one of the things I was really impressed with was not just, it's not your stuff, while it's extremely encouraging and inspiring, it's not pie in the sky. It's really practical and based in reality. And in your book, When Running Is Not Enough, you talk about the lessons learned about limits, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I don't know how to put this. Like, there's always risks when you try something so incredibly difficult. And there's no doubt about it. Anybody who's tried an Ironman or even any long distance event, like even like a marathon or a half Ironman, that at some point you've got to go out of your comfort zone, right? You're not going to be comfortable the whole Ironman race. You've got to push through that. And I'll give you a good example. There was this girl new in town here in the city, and she wanted to do something in athletics that was really great. She wanted to be successful at something. She tried everything. And she asked me if I would run a 10K race with her and pace her, because she, more than anything in the world, wanted to break 50 minutes for a 10K. And so, yeah, I'll do the race with you. So I thought the best way to do it was to keep her as even a pace as possible, because I didn't think she would have enough left at the end to push if I went too slow in the beginning. So I thought, we'll keep it even. So go off, we head off in there, and we get almost to the 5K mark. I could see the person ahead with the watch, and they're calling out the time as you get them. And he's going like 24:55, 24:56, 24. And he says, we just go by me. He says 25. Pretty the exact split I wanted, right? By then, I'd learned pace pretty well. I'd done that same course in 35:45 the year before. So I knew it well, right? So I thought, well, she's going to have this if I just, but you know, there was about 2 miles to go and she virtually just about stopped. And you think I could get her to keep up the pace that we were on? Like, to her, it was probably very tough, but to me, it seemed like she should be able to do it. So by the time we got to the finish, it was like 53 minutes, and she was like so demoralized. And I know now what happened, and I wish then I knew what I would learn years later. I should have talked to her, and I said, Maria, that was her name, Maria, named after the island in the beautiful girl, really, really smart, but she just wanted to be this athlete so much. And I knew what the problem was. I should have said to her, you don't like going out of your comfort zone. Until you learn to train and race out of your comfort zone, you're not going to reach those goals. I mean, if you stop every time, like, it hurts or becomes tough, it makes it really hard. And that's exactly what happened. I want to read you, I don't know if you ever read this in the back of one of my books. This is the Q&A, right?
Oh, yeah. I had the digital version of that one. So go ahead.
I wrote this, I put this on the back. A challenging journey is not without risk. Often we feel we can go no further, we can do no more, and that one more step is impossible. In that one moment, we face the abyss. the ultimate challenge of mind, body, and spirit, and to discover an inner strength we never knew existed. And in a glorious revelation, realize that our lives have changed forever. That's what I get her to do. It's like, if she got to the abyss and she stopped, but if she had to go through it and pushed through it and got her goal, she would have made it. And that,
right. And to your point, like, that's a learning experience.
yeah.
And, you know, I don't know where her story continues from there, but, you know, it's possible that she may have learned what she needed to learn from you that day. And who knows if she then, you know, took that information and tried again, or, you know, trained differently or took a different approach. But this is, yeah.
And so I don't know what happened with
Right.
her.
But this is the point, is that it's about like sort of self knowledge. And if you have enough experiences in these races and training for these races, you'll inevitably have an experience of having done something you didn't think you could do. I mean, that's just part of the process. It happens repeatedly, really, when you're training for big events, long distance events. And you learn tricks, you learn different, because it's just as much of a mental game as it is a physical game. And you learn, but it's tricky because you have to listen to your body. And I think maybe the most difficult part of getting this right, you know, in terms of training and racing, is knowing when your body is screaming stop, you know, being able to distinguish when to listen to it and when not to, right? Because there are times when the right thing to do is to listen, like to say, like, your body is giving you all these messages like, hey, buddy, enough. But sometimes it's just, as you put it, it's this discomfort that you haven't yet pushed through. And it's fascinating whenever you've had an experience of feeling like you can do no more, but however you manage to do it, you get yourself to keep going, and you go quite a ways more. And then you think back on that moment and you go, I thought that was my limit. It obviously wasn't. And it's just a fascinating experience and process of discernment, I would say, of listening to your body. And this very much applies to during the course of training as well, right? Because you don't want to overtrain. Listening to your body and respecting your body, and, you know, knowing how to push it, how much to push it, when to back off. And it's a calibration. And even I know, just from reading your own story and the different, you know, the many years of training, you know, you made those same miscalculations, and it comes out of exuberance and enthusiasm. You want to like push as hard as you can and do as much as you can. But some of the lessons are knowing when to scale back, and the absolute essential component of rest.
Yeah. And that was my downfall. I had a really good race one year in Ironman Canada. And this was before I learned a lot more about Ironman. And I thought, well, if I train harder, I'll do even better, right? No, that's not how it works. I should have done what worked for me when I succeeded. That's exactly what I should have done. Instead, I started to do more. I trained harder. I pushed myself over the red line so many times. It's like you said, never listened to my body telling me like, this is enough, you know. And I should have known better, but I just kept pushing. And I just thought, well, you know, this is part of training, whatever. Sometimes I would train 20 days straight, not rest. And I went into a 10K race at home. And after the first kilometer, I was in trouble. I knew something was wrong, right? And I just didn't have it. I didn't know what was wrong. And I was signed up for the Ironman. So I went to Ironman Canada because I was signed up for it. After this hard year of training that I didn't listen to. And I had actually done Dave Scott's training book that he brought out in 1986, when he set a new record in the Ironman that year too. But he brought the book out actually at the awards, I think. So it was pretty smart marketing. But I realized now he probably did that, and he probably knows himself. The book he wrote was too difficult for age group triathletes. It was more maybe for pros. because I'll tell you why. Because when I went to Ironman Canada, Dave Scott was there and talking to people. You know, he was being an ambassador for the sport. They had brought him down there. So I looked at him when he was finished talking, and he came over and we talked. And I said, you know, I did your whole program this year. And he said, what? And I thought,
what, you didn't think people would actually do it?
I think he realized, he had come to the realization that this was way too tough for people to do, but I followed it for the whole year. And it was my undoing, right? Not just his book, but the way I pushed to make myself do everything, and, you know, working full time at a heavy lifting job and not counting that part of the day's work. And that's the year that starting on the Wednesday night before the race, that I couldn't sleep, which has never happened to me. Like, I developed insomnia for that night. I thought, oh, it's unusual. Usually I get my 6 hours sleep. I just, boom, I'm out like a light, right? Thursday night, same thing. And I would wake up every 45 minutes. I didn't know what. And in hindsight, I thought I should have just gone and got a sleeping pill, right? Because the race was coming, getting closer and closer. This went on until the eve of the race. I was up so early the morning of the race, 2 a.m., I couldn't sleep.
Which, by the way, that's normal for the night before a race, not for every night for a week before the race. That's normal the night before the race. The race nerves and you know, don't worry about that. If you're doing a race, a marathon, any kind of race, it's perfectly natural to have that race anxiety, and you'll be fine. That's the thing, is you worry, oh no, I need to sleep. But you'll actually be fine. But you know, this is not what you're describing. You're describing an ongoing.
Even make note of that. Make sure you get a good night's sleep 2 nights before the race.
Right.
Not sleep well, which is normal, what you said, right? But I wasn't sleeping at all for 4 or 5 days, right? I probably got, I don't know, 7 hours sleep in 4 days. Like, it was crazy. And so I thought, well, I might as well go down and to the race start to get checked in. I was the first one out of over like 2,500 athletes to get marked, because I had nowhere else to go. Like, that's how bad it was, right? And I did the swim, okay. I made it through the bike, and I got about a mile, 2 miles maybe in the run, and that was it. My day was over. I had nothing. And an ambulance came and took me, and there was nothing, duration or anything. I had done a 2.4 mile swim and a 112-mile bike on virtually no sleep. So that was basically the beginning of the end of my career and the beginning of Ironstruck.
So let's hear that story.
So, and I think I even talked about it in here, is that creative compulsions can be a mighty force and can supply the necessary drive to make the seemingly impossible possible. The one word of warning I should give, however, is that it's important to temper your compulsive creativity. If I had been able to harness my compulsive training and racing and allow sufficient time for my body to rest and recover, I would still be active in running and triathlon. However, I do believe that things happen for a reason. And had I continued to compete, Ironstruck would never have been born. There would be no Ironstruck website and no Ironstruck books. I believe in fate, and that every single thing we do impacts not just our destiny, but also the destiny of the people we touch in the course of our lives. So I can't help but wonder about emails I receive over the years, the people who are, you know, much like this one. And I got this email, and this is all after, like, to me, failing at staying to be a triathlete and becoming a writer and creating this book. And here's a woman from Namibia. She's 39 years old. Said, within a year, I went from fat to fit enough to complete Ironman South Africa in 16 hours, 12 minutes, and 39 seconds, enjoying every minute of it. I gave up smoking. And my whole life, my whole outlook on life changed. Once you've done an Ironman, you can do anything. Stumbling onto your website, Ironstruck, changed my life forever. Thanks so much. And here's a woman in Africa that I will never meet, who somehow became Ironstruck, and it changed her life. So I went on to say, so am I sorry that I pushed myself so hard that I had to give up running and triathlon? How can I be when I ultimately resulted in the creation of Ironstruck and would one day have an impact on someone in need of inspiration on the other side of the world and change their lives for the better forever? So through this entire experience of the past 35 years, I have learned that we all have the ability to inspire others through our actions. And if there is one thing that is in short supply in this world, it's inspiration. And that's what you're doing with your podcast. You're doing the same thing. We are all capable of inspiring others. Sometimes just a few words. And if you read, it's Kona calling with an incident with a Japanese athlete near the end of the
It's awesome. Very powerful.
Yeah. So
I love that, Ray. And you know, the way that I like to frame it is that we wouldn't necessarily choose everything that happens to us in life, because some of the things that happen to us are really painful. But even though we might not choose everything that happens to us, we can find a productive, positive way to use everything that happens to us. And that sounds like it's exactly what you did when you reached the end of your, you know, what you felt was sort of like a career cut short. You had aspirations to continue doing this into your 60s and beyond. And you couldn't, but instead of lamenting that and making a tragedy out of this incredible life you had lived up to that point, you then transformed yourself again into someone who inspired people and inspires people all over the world. And you started off by creating the website, right?
Yeah, which has since like gone the way of the dodo bird, I guess. I know Google algorithms really hurt my website, which is a shame but people can still go there. They should look on the right-hand side that says categories, and all my articles are in there. All you have to do is click.
Ironstruck.com, correct?
Yeah. And even though I haven't been able to keep it up to date and everything, well, start from the beginning. So I'm sitting at home. I can't compete anymore. And I had all this time in my hand. All the time I was spending training, et cetera, and racing and whatever.
Yeah, that's a huge void, right? That's opened up.
There must be a lot of people like me out there. Like I was when I first started running, that have doubts about themselves. Have great potential, but they don't know it, may live their entire lives and not realize what they're truly capable of. They get into this complacency. Oh, I'm happy with my life. But then deep down, maybe they're really not. There's something missing. They don't really know what it is. So I thought, well, I should start. I'm going to write about what I experienced. Put it on a website, and I just started by writing these articles about things.
What year would this have been?
Let's see. Gosh. So if I wrote Ironstruck in 2006, probably I'm thinking 2005.
Okay, so not too long before.
No, because I did Ironman Coeur d'Alene 2004 and 2003. Those were my last two Ironman races, right? So that was the end, basically. I tried after that fiasco in Penticton to do those two, and my times just regressed, and I was back to what I did in Hawaii, right? Like I was a beginner. I had nothing. So that was all what
you came full circle, is the way I think you put it.
I tried to get, but I couldn't. I just didn't have it. I knew it. So that was the end of my career. Effectively, that race in Penticton ended it. I just thought, I did.
And by the way, just to close that loop, the onset of your insomnia that you had previously not experienced became a chronic problem, right?
Yeah. And it was taking sleeping pills that got me through to do Coeur d'Alene. Like I was taking, but it's still, when you are a victim of I ended up having overtraining syndrome, which is an actual thing, right? And I was diagnosed by some of the best athletic doctors in the city who dealt with pro athletes and Olympic athletes, who tested me for everything to eliminate everything. that it could be.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, oh, everything's fine. So you're right. It's overtraining.
So in other words, it sounds like you through overtraining, probably for extended, years of your life, you interfered with your body's kind of
internal clock. I think somehow,
your circadian rhythm or some, like you got yourself out of whack from maybe overstimulation or over exertion.
Right. So I was done after that. I knew that I just couldn't compete at that level anymore, that there was not much point pushing when my body was just so run down. And it's a cascading effect, right? You get all kinds of other things on top of that. Well, the insomnia was permanent. I still have it. And we're talking a lot of years now, ended up with colitis, ended up, my vision started to go, nothing life threatening, but definitely life changing. It's just like cascade. I got tinnitus, like everything, just like it just started to break down. And that was just my body says, well, you did it to yourself. Right.
Do you think, how much of that do you think is a result of, the putting your body through the ringer, versus might some of these conditions have arisen through the natural order of things, even if you had not done the overtraining? What do you think?
Eventually, probably it would have, because at that point I hadn't learned the importance of incorporating rest into your training. And that was the key. That was absolutely the key. And when I took back my calendar, looked at it from the year that I had my best Ironman that I was trying to emulate, every time I got tired, and I did, instead of like writing a training schedule and following it to a T, if I didn't have the energy, I didn't go. I rested. And that was the key. That's why I had such a good race. And it never dawned on me. I just made such a, I should have gone with what got me into the really good race, but instead I tried to do too much. I tried to do more so I would race better, but that's not.
Yeah, right. But my point is that how, these different health conditions that you've experienced, these, how is there any way to definitively know if they came as a direct result of what you had done with your training? It sounds like the insomnia may, from the consultations you did with doctors, it sounds like they concluded that the insomnia was a result of your overtraining. But some of these other conditions, I'm just speculating. I have no idea, and I'm certainly not a doctor. But I'm just wondering if these things, what relationship your overtraining, if any, to those conditions. And also maybe, in your defense, as it were, all of the incredible conditioning that you did may have helped you either delay the onset of some health problems, or maybe even nipped some in the bud completely. Maybe it's a combination of things, right? Like maybe the conditioning that you did helped you in some ways and benefited your health, and maybe by overdoing it, you may have harmed yourself in some ways. It's hard to isolate and know these things, right?
I always thought that I had somehow impacted my immune system through the overtraining, which opens you up to a whole host of things. That's kind of why they were connected, but you might be right. Maybe they're not. Maybe they would have happened anyway.
It's hard to know.
You never know.
Yeah.
A doctor will tell you that. They don't know. Like, they just, it just happens. Like a lot of people get the same things I have.
Sure. Yeah. So you basically enter this new phase of your life post athletic career, post endurance races, let's say, and you create this website and you draw people to it from all over the world who are interested and curious about Ironman or triathlon. And what kind of, before you then decided to write your first book, what was the feedback you were getting from people like who visited your website? What kinds of things did you hear from people?
Everything was like one girl saying, I was late for work this morning because I was on your website for 5 hours. He said, it's your fault. Because I have to admit, after a few months of writing on there was a wealth of information, and there was a very big lack of, even then, of Ironman information out there. There still weren't a lot of triathlon books. There still weren't a lot of triathlon websites. So that's the kind of feedback I was getting. And then I had one interesting email. This young guy from South Africa, again, and he had a twin brother, and they both did Ironman South Africa. And they took my book to the race with them, and they took they printed off information from my website to take with them. They had it on paper, right? So they could read, because I had what to do before the race, the day before, and, how to get ready for, And he said, and they both finished the race, by the way, he said, those magic words, why don't you write a book? And that's where that came from. Anybody can inspire anybody. Now, here's some fella
I love it,
who inspired me, and I thought, I inspired him, but then he inspired me, and I thought, well, why not? Remember I said at the very beginning that when I was a kid, nobody ever said to me, no teacher, nobody ever said, you write really well. This is something you could really do. Nobody ever said that. I didn't know I could write until I started doing that, those posts on the website. And I never thought of writing a book. I said, I can't write a book. Well, then I thought, well, I already have. I just got to take it from there and put it on here, right? And so Ironstruck, the Ironman Triathlon journey, was born because of that one sentence.
and I owe my experience with your book to that guy who inspired you to make a book out of it. Right? I may never have found you otherwise,
and everybody else in the world who read the book, because it never.
This is just a wonderful example again of the ripple effects of encouragement and inspiration. When you're inspired and you do something and it inspires other people, and it becomes this that has this chain effect, which is, I think, about the coolest thing that we as humans can do is have this sort of like positive impact and ripple effect on each other, and it can echo through generations, right? And echo through
and people can be from anywhere, any gender, any nationality, any age, and it was coming from all over the place. And I started getting these emails, right? And there's so many stand out. This one woman said, yeah, I found your book and I'm doing my first Ironman. And, I have highlighted that book. It's dog-eared. When, I read it. I was going to Europe in business. I read it, and I read it again coming back. And our family and I went on holidays to Hawaii. And while the kids were in the water with my husband, I was like spilling wine on the book and reading the pages again. And she said, I've destroyed your book. So I sent her another book, and I said, here's what.
Nice.
I said, give me your address. I'll send you a book. So that was so cool. And then the fellow who emailed me and said, yeah, I have your book, and it helped me do my first Ironman. And I wrote in it the date of my Ironman, my finish time, and just a little blurb about the book. And then I gave it to somebody else who was doing their first Ironman. I told them to pass it on to somebody else who was doing their first Ironman. I don't know where that book is. I wish I could see it, but imagine there's a book somewhere that has.
That's so cool.
Places, right?
You had, before we started recording, you had alluded to someone you heard from Great Britain. And
yeah.
Can you tell me that story?
Well, yourself, you've mentioned it, that if somebody emailed me, and I always made that commitment to myself and to anybody who was following Ironstruck, that if they sent an email, I would always answer them to the best of my ability. So I got this email from Great Britain, and this fella said, I just want to do the Ironman so bad. And, the race is like, I think he said 7 weeks away. And he said, my brother passed away unexpectedly. And We just had the funeral, and I am just at a loss as what to do. And so I didn't answer him that day. Like, I thought about it for a day. Well, what, like, I want, I'll get it right,
Right. Yeah.
So I emailed him back the next day and I said, sounds like you're really close to your brother, and I have a feeling that he would have loved to see you do this race. I said, you've got 7 weeks. I said, don't jump right back into it. Just, for a week or so, just run easy, swim easy, get back into your training. Definitely do the race. Then with 3 weeks to go, just start your taper and then believe in all the training you did and go to the race. So never heard anything back. That's what I sent him. To me, it was what I felt the answer should be. So I'm in Ironman Canada in Penticton, and there was a bookstore there on Main Street. People who have been there know there was a Tim Hortons there, and there was a bookstore beside the Tim Hortons, the coffee shop. And they let me set a table up there and do book signings during Ironman week. And so this guy comes up and he says, oh, gee, I really wanted to meet you. He said, I sent you an email from Great Britain. I didn't know he was doing Ironman Canada. He never said that.
Oh, that was the race that was 7 weeks off?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So I said, oh my God. He says, well, I'm so glad you're here. Like, good luck in that race, And he just wanted to thank me. He says, I'm so glad you said that. And I thought, oh my God, what a small world. What a really small. There he is standing in front of me. And I just, like, 7 weeks before, was sending him this, like, very difficult email. And I only heard one more thing from him. When was that? I guess the day after the race, maybe 2 days after the race, I had an email that said, my finish time. Thank you.
Wow. Beautiful.
That's it. Never heard from him again, but that was
beautiful. Ray, in the interest of time, I'd like to wrap this up by asking you, first of all, just thanking you once again, just for all of the inspiration and for this awesome conversation that I feel really privileged to have had with you. And, I'm really moved by your own story. I think there's so much for people to be inspired by within your story. And I love the various transformations within it. Having this less than ideal childhood and being, having the good fortune of getting this bolt of inspiration from the sort of an unlikely place, which was your television set in 1976, and how that puts you on this whole other path and of personal transformation and growth and accomplishment and getting these, like, core needs of yours met that you never got met as a kid, and learning your own worth and your own value. And then even after facing this really difficult, it sounds like a really difficult to accept time when you realized, like, that your athletic career had kind of come to an end, and even turning that into a positive information by taking all of the lessons you had gleaned from your life experience, putting it out there in the interest of providing a resource to others at a time when there really weren't many, if any, other resources for people interested in this stuff. And you get this incredible response from people all over the world. You get this inspiration comes back at you to, why don't you write a book? And now you've got 7 under your belt, plus an updated version of Ironstruck, I should mention to people. So there is a revised, updated 2nd edition. Nice. He's got that right there for those watching this. It's a beautiful cover, by the way. And so I'm wondering, at this stage of your life, you said you're 73, where do you go from here? And what, at this point, who is the person you're most aspiring to be now? What's next on the horizon for you? What do you have any specific personal goal or enterprise that that you're looking out towards right now?
My first love was running, and I would love just to do a 10K race again. And I started running again. It's very, very difficult, which is really hard to accept because I struggle to do, say, 8 kilometers or 45 minutes when I used to go on 5-hour runs, and it was so easy. But taking a page out of my own book, out of Seniors on the Move, that's an important book too, because I believe that a lot of people die way too young, because when they retire from whatever their job is or whatever their career is, they thought, well, now it's time to put my feet up and do nothing. I have always believed, and I've said it so many times, that our bodies are how can I put that? They are a miracle of creation, maybe the number one wonder of the world, because we are completely in control. But everything we do, our body tries to accommodate, right? So if you want to do anything, your body will accommodate that. If you want to learn how to swim, your muscles will, learn to adapt. If you want to go like this with a little heavier weight than you're used to, then your bicep will get bigger and stronger because you're asking it to do more, right?
It's responsive.
It's responsive. And when people look in the mirror and say, well, look what I've become. I'm overweight. I smoke, I drink. Like, well, yeah, but that's now. You brought yourself to that point. Now you can take yourself away from it and begin a whole new journey, right? And your body is going to respond. I mean, I have so many stories. Like a woman came to me and says, oh, I just bought your book. And she, I would say, was about 230 pounds. Really big woman, really overweight. And to make a long story short, and I would run into her now and then, and I would do a sign, and she'd come say hello. And I went to Ironman Canada and was there the year that she finished Ironman Canada. And she had like 75 or 80 pounds and became an Ironman, right? Because she said, you believed in me, right? And that's
powerful stuff.
That's powerful. But what it tells me is that we are the boss of our bodies. And she decided she had enough. And as soon as she changed the way she lived, her body reacted positively, right? I mean, there's a reason why. And I put it in Ironstruck that, if a person suddenly goes blind, the senses that we all have, and I've always had, all become more acute for that person. They can hear better. They can smell better. They can have a sense of touch is better. They have to, because it's their body's trying to survive. It's trying to adapt to the new situation, right? The body adapts to everything as we're telling it what to do. You're suddenly relegated to a wheelchair. What's the first thing that happens? Well, your legs atrophy. Why? Because your body senses you're not using them. Why build those muscles up? So the legs atrophy, but the upper body gets stronger if you're pushing yourself around in the wheelchair. It's adapting again to what you're doing. And there's checks and balances all the time like that. So in the seniors book, and they did this, they went to a senior's home and had seniors doing weightlifting 3 times a week, just what they could manage. They might be 85, 90 years old, but if they could, do this with 2 pounds or 2.5 pounds or whatever, and, they slowly would increase it because your bodies, even at that age, started to get stronger again. And there was a woman who even says, I don't need this, boom, walker anymore.
Wow.
But her own again. Because they got old, they bought into being old. When old folks home says, well, I'm old now, I guess that's it. No, it's not it. I mean, when I wrote this book, I made a tour of Western provinces and stopped at every senior's home and gave them 2 copies to put in the library. Just gave them to put them in your library. Maybe somebody would read them, right? To try and inspire them, like, hey, just because you're older doesn't mean life's over.
Yeah. It also speaks to the mental aspect of things too, right? It's not just your physical body, it's the attitude, it's that you adopt. Oh, things are over for me. Well, if that's the message that you're sending yourself mentally, then that's going to be your reality as well, right? Versus maybe I can do X today, and then if I do that, maybe I can do Y tomorrow. So it's that interaction, and that's was always so fascinating to me about the process of training for races, was both the mental and the physical, and how they work hand in hand, and how both components are absolutely essential to adapting to the demands of training, and then eventually like to accomplishing your goal, right? I can see behind you the barbell. So what is do you have a current regimen, workout regimen?
3 months ago, I started weightlifting again because I'm into what I said in my book. And I'm 73. I still work part-time. I work in a warehouse. I do a lot of lifting and, because I want to, like, stay active, right?
Right.
And in 3 months, I've gained half a shirt size.
So you inspired yourself.
It's 73. Yesterday I had a workout and I squatted 220 pounds 20 times. I used to do that when I was 55, and I'm now doing it when I'm 73, and nothing has really changed. I seem to have much the same strength. If I demand it from my body, it's there. Like, it still hasn't gone anywhere. I just had to, wake it up. Took a couple of months, and then boom, there I was.
Interesting.
Went back in the pool for the first time in, I don't know, 7 years. And, after 3 weeks, my 100-meter time was about the same as when I was.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
And the body remembers, right? It calls upon, it's in there. All of that swimming you did over the course of your life, the body, as you said, you put it, it's sort of waking up those muscles and memory cells. Yeah.
It's there. But where I struggle is with endurance. And that's why as soon as I try and run far or swim 2 miles, that's when I run into trouble.
Yeah.
But if it's like, I can do a weight workout in 25, 30 minutes, do 7 exercises to failure. And doing that has gained me a lot of strength. It does take a lot of time, right? Because I know how to do it. I've done it for years, and I know what, I watch kids now. You'll be at the gym, they'll do a set, they'll be on their cell phones for 10 minutes while I wait to use that piece of machinery, right? And I don't know what they're doing, what they could possibly be missing at the gym, right? Then they'll do a few more things and sit down and put their phone on again. I said, what the? You're crazy. But anyway, that's the new reality, I guess. But I guess what I'm saying is, you asked what I'm doing. Well, that's what I'm doing. I want to give myself the best chance to be self-sufficient as long as I can. Because time's passing much faster now. And I think as you get older, it passes faster. And soon I'll be 80. I mean, I'm 73 now. 7 more years and the big 80. If I make it that far, I mean, who knows? You can get hit by the proverbial bus anytime.
Yeah.
But, maybe there's things I still have to do. Maybe there's still people to inspire. Maybe I'll drop dead tomorrow and I had to do this podcast because somebody's going to see this and it's going to change. Maybe that's the whole reason I'm hanging on this long. Who knows?
Right. Well, Ray, thank you again so much. I really am honored. I happen to know that you don't do interviews usually, so I'm that much more honored and that much more appreciative of your willingness to come on this show. Where would you direct people who are interested in your books or in learning more about you or learning about Ironman? Where would you direct them?
Well, obviously the best place to go now is Amazon, and hopefully you can provide some links to the books for them.
Yeah, I'm going to put all that in the show notes for sure.
Yeah. Because this is like who I am, right? And much of what's in here is in here. I just updated this. Some more things that I learned. The best parts of this book are in this book. And so I should mention during the pandemic, I was selling 15, 20. Like, I don't market this book. Every month, 15 or 20 were disappearing, most of the United Kingdom and the US. I brought that on. I guess people wanted to read. Like every month, like boom, 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 just on and on, like. So, and it could be just word of mouth,
I love what you said, though, about the book about Ironstruck. This is who I am. So the person you want to be is right there. It's in print. It's embodied in book form for anyone to be inspired by. And I certainly have been one of those people that you've touched. And I'm grateful to you. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and keep doing what you're doing.
Well, and thanks for having me on here. And yeah, people should know this is my first ever interview.
Amazing.
And it probably will be my last. I can't ever see doing any more. I don't know. Who knows? But so yeah, I hope they listen to this podcast and watch your podcast and all your podcasts, because they're meant to do what I'm trying to do, is inspire people anywhere in the world who needs just a little extra push to become
the person they want to be.
More than you ever thought possible.
More than you ever thought possible. I love it. Thanks again, Ray, and best to you.
Take care.